Dear viewers, thank you for joining us. You're watching OBN Horn of Africa. This is our weekly program, Talk to OBN show. In this edition, we are going to discuss about the ongoing conflict in the north. The conflict in the northern part of Ethiopia has re-erupted between TPLF and the federal government. And I joined by a very senior political economy analyst, Professor Lawrence Freeman. Thank you for joining me.
A pleasure to be with you again.
Okay, what is your reflection on the resumption of the conflict in the north?
It indicates to me that there are people, external forces in Africa and outside of Africa that want to use the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, the TPLF, and use their own mindset and mentality for a larger purpose, which is to destabilize and weaken the government of the Republic of Ethiopia. And I think they are being encouraged and supported and manipulated out of their own ethno-nationalism to launch this attack, which has no purpose and will accomplish nothing positive for even the Tigrayan people, except to continue to prevent Ethiopia from moving forward and develop.
Okay, the Ethiopian federal government has been proposing a peace talk with that of TPLF, but the TPLF on the 11th hour declines this offer. Why TPLF declined the offer and went to the battlefield?
Well, I don't know the exact motivation for the timing, but look, the TPLF has remained an armed organization in control of one of the regional states of the country of Ethiopia, Tigray. And as long as that condition exists, then you have the potential for more military conflict. As long until the TPLF is disarmed and Tigray is brought back in to the rest of the country as an integral part of the nation, this condition will exist. And at any point, you can set off a trigger motion where the TPLF will go into some military action, which they believe in their internal mindset is somehow going to help them. But the people or other people are pulling the strings and supporting and encouraging that action to take place because they, the people pulling the strings, want to see a weakened country of Ethiopia. So the TPLF are pawns, and they can be moved around the chessboard at will by people who know how to manipulate their perverted ethno-nationalist belief structure. As long as that belief structure is there, and as long as the nation of Ethiopia has all these ethnic national groupings, it is constantly in danger of the TPLF or others of launching military attacks to weaken the country.
Okay, the Ethiopian federal government used to advocate peace over war repeatedly, but as I have said a while ago, the TPLF declined the offer. I mean, in the proposal, the Ethiopian government has said the peace talk will be undergone anywhere, anytime, without any precondition. I mean, do you think the TPLF got its own precondition to sit and negotiate around table?
My understanding of the matter is that the TPLF has no intention of disarming, and they believe that they should be controlling the state. Now, that's their internal ethnic belief structure. It's a false ethno-nationalism because Ethiopia is a republic. It's a nation state. And therefore, as long as they remain in that mindset, they will continue to disrupt, refuse to cooperate, and not go along with actually settling the issue. Because outside forces, geopolitical oligarchical elites who want to see the government, the elected government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, either weakened or removed, they will use the TPLF. They will encourage them. I'm convinced that they would not be so stupid to take this action unless they thought they were going to get outside support, because they're not going to be able to succeed militarily. So what are they actually accomplishing? They're destroying or weakening the nation of Ethiopia. They're actually harming their own people in Tigray. The people in Tigray are suffering from the action of the TPLF. So the motivation is not to help the people of the Tigray region. The motivation is to carry out actually a treasonous activity against the nation, which in their own demented mind structure, they believe is what they should do. But the problem is not going to go away. No matter how many peace offers the government makes, there's a larger problem plaguing Ethiopia, which is this ethno-nationalism is really entrenched in Ethiopia. And that problem has to be removed. You can't have people in one region deciding that they were not going to follow the government's policies and they're going to pursue their own attacks on the government. As I said earlier today, I'm reminded of Abraham Lincoln in 1858 when he was running for the US Senate in Illinois. He said the United States cannot remain a house divided. He meant it cannot be half slavery, half pro-slavery, and half anti-slavery. Well, the issue in Ethiopia is not slavery, but the Ethiopian government, country, cannot last as long as it has insurgents in it claiming they have national rights equal to the government. That will not remain forever. So either the ethnicity and ethno-nationalism are eliminated, or the country of Ethiopia can be imploded.
Okay, different international stakes and personalities are condemning and denouncing TPLF's act, recent TPLF's act, especially looting fuel, 12 tankers of fuels and about more than 500,000 gallons of fuel. Still, we're just seeing some sort of condemnation from people from that of USAID, World Bank, you see. Do you think that this international donors and the people around the White House understood TPLF on the 11th hour?
Once the TPLF breaking into the World Food Program and taking this amount of fuel, this cannot be ignored. So there has been a certain amount of public condemnation of this, especially because the World Food Program is so involved in trying to relieve the humanitarian distress in the region. But the United States government has really not shown any indication of dealing with this problem. Remember, going back now to the beginning of the conflict, the State Department, without any hard intelligence whatsoever, none, zero, proclaimed that the government was carrying out ethnic cleansing, genocide, and using sexual exploitation as a weapon. None of those charges was ever proved. So the government of the United States has not taken the action it should. And in fact, President Biden, his recent comments on his so-called humanitarian day referenced the treatment of the Tigrayan suffering, but didn't address the larger question, which is that Ethiopia is suffering, Afar is suffering, Amara is suffering. Everybody in Ethiopia is suffering from this conflict, which could have been ended as soon as it started, except that there was outside support from the international media, from the international community of nations, and especially the United States and the West, by condemning and attacking the government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. They were supporting the TPLF. And they have not shown an indication that they're reversing that condition. And because they've continually sanctioned Ethiopia, removed Ethiopia from AGOA. So there is no real hard attack by the rest of the world. If there was on the TPLF, they could shut them down. But they're not interested in shutting them down. There are certain geopolitical elites oligarchical elites who want the TPLF and other ethnic groups to remain in Ethiopia so that they can be used to weaken and undermine the intentions and aspirations of the people of Ethiopia. And this has to be understood. This is not simply, in other words, when you carry out geopolitical policies, you use the people on the ground, you find their psychological weakness to manipulate them. In this case, it's easy in Ethiopia because ethnic nationalism is all over the place. So therefore, they use the desires of the TPLF to manipulate them to carry out a larger purpose. And if they didn't have that larger purpose, they could shut down the TPLF anytime. But they want to use them. And therefore, the government should be launching a much more aggressive campaign to elevate the political dialogue in the country on the failures of ethnicity and the fact that ethnicity is not equal to citizenship. Human beings are not defined biologically or hereditarily. They're defined by their creativity. And the government has now launched an aggressive education cultural campaign that could embody all the people to see the problems of the Ethiopian society as it's evolved over the last 30 years on the ethnic federalism. They have to shift the playing field. They have to go to a higher conception of organizing and educating and having a dialogue with the Ethiopian population. You can't just focus on stopping the TPLF. Yes, that has to be done. But there's a much larger demand for discussion of ideas that has to take place in the Ethiopian society, which I don't see is happening.
All right, TPLF was on a previous round of war, and in this round, deploying and recruiting child soldiers and mobilizing human web. The international community failed to denounce this act because it's a crime. Using children and civilians as a cannon of fodder is allowed internationally.
Of course, it's a crime. What the TPLF is doing by declaring in their statements that they want to overthrow the government of Ethiopia, that's a crime. That's treason. Then using child soldiers is a crime. Using civilians is a crime. You can't look for condemnations of one or other aspect. You have to condemn and expose the whole operation. Who in Africa and outside of Africa, who is encouraging and supporting the TPLF to launch a treasonous war against their own people, against their own nation, against their own government? If they didn't have outside support, this would not be happening. So yes, there are many crimes being committed, but you're simply going to complain about each crime, or are you going to deal with the fact that there is an ongoing, and has been now for almost 2 years, effort to destabilize and weaken the nation of Ethiopia? It started back actually in November. In November of 2020, it escalated with the Biden administration and Blinken in early 2021, and it has not been reversed. That's the big crime internationally. Why are people and nations in the rest of the world, in the West, which preaches endlessly about democracy, why won't they support the democratically elected government of Ethiopia? That's a good question. And until we get some of those questions and discussed, you're not going to simply stop what's going on, because what's going on is being instigated for a purpose. The purpose is to weaken the country of Ethiopia, to stop its progressive development. Even the advantage I have over the government of Ethiopia is they're looking at the particulars on the ground. I see clearly the larger strategic picture, and that informs me on a higher level to understand what's going on the ground.
Okay, you've been heard, commenting about Ethiopian politics so many times. recently, before a couple of months, you published an article about Ethiopian politics. The West, especially the US and US allies, need to have a regime change in Ethiopia, and that was not successful. Instead, they went to choose another phase. That was regime castration. That was not again successful. They're going for a third phase. What is this third phase of?
If you want to look at this as a third phase, which you just delineated, this is going to be constant warfare. In other words, Ethiopia, prior to the war, going back to 2020, Ethiopia was making progress, and it continues to make progress with the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Ethiopia was making progress in its light manufacturing and its manufacturing districts in the Hawassa and other areas, was utilizing the new railroad that was built. So there was a positive, progressive policy that Ethiopia was pursuing, and actually was leading other nations in Africa and leading in the Horn of Africa. That's been arrested, that's been stopped to some large degree. So the question is, we have to think about why these attacks are coming now. And it may be because Ethiopia was breaking out of the mode of being controlled by international forces with the new government of the Prosperity Party. If you want to, going off your discussion, regime change didn't work and the government is still there. But if you want to stymie the government, if you want to stop this progress, if you want to weaken the country, then you have constant military attacks. And you can see it by the TPLF. It could also come from other groups. The OLF could be involved at some point. So they will constantly punch and disrupt the country, so the country can't function properly the way that people want it to. And you'll see this conflict could end in a couple of weeks, and another conflict could come up. And that could end, and another conflict could come up. So we could see a series of conflicts and wars because the country has been weakened by the concept of ethnicity and nationalism. That's the disease. That's the cancer. And various groups have formed under that, using that cancer as their mindset. And they're militarily armed. My question is, why is the TPLF still armed after there was a ceasefire early this year in the summer? The fact that they're still armed and other outside forces are continuing to provide them with arms means your problem is not going away. So they will hit and run and hit and run to weaken the government. And the government will not be unified, as I mentioned in my Lincoln quote. That could well be what we're looking at as the third phase, continual disruption.
Okay, people like you and other independent journalists, criticize Dr. Tedros Adhanom, General Director of World Health Organization, of weaponizing his position to back TPLF. Do you agree with this notion?
Well, I think, especially recently, I know there's been a lot of accusations against Dr. Tedros, but if you look at his statements recently, he's really gone way beyond what's acceptable as basically a UN official. The World Health Organization is part of the United Nations. And therefore, his actions and his statements are not appropriate. If he's going to become a partisan in the conflict supporting the TPLF against the government, then he really has to consider resigning from his position. But he's gone way beyond what's acceptable as a so-called international public official.
Of course, you have highlighted about it a while ago, but I need a very clear analysis about this question. USA Director Samantha Power and other like Antonio Blinken, these people are very affiliated to TPLF, and they were, criticizing the federal government on those previous round of war. in this current conflict, they are denouncing TPLF and the TPLF Act. Is there a change of political move and kind of giving a cold shoulder to TPLF because TPLF is on the verge of dying?
Look, you mentioned Samantha Powers. You mentioned Anthony Blinken, Secretary of State. Samantha Powers is head of USAID. You also have in the Biden administration, Susan Rice, very close supporter of the TPLF. And recently, no longer in the administration, I don't think, is Gail Smith, who actually was involved with the TPLF on some intimate level, or leaders of the TPLF. So you have those individuals, but the larger question, which I address in an article I just put up on my website, LawrenceFreemanAfricanWorld.com, is Anthony Blinken's recent trip to Africa, is you have what I would call a human rights mafia, or some have called it the human rights imperialist, because they believe that they can dictate and order and threaten countries in the world that don't conform to their, quote, version of human rights and democracy. Now, their version of human rights and democracy is not mine, and it's very fluid, because they talk and blab democracy. African nations don't have democracy, we can't support them. But yet, they don't do the things that would support democracy, such as providing infrastructure for development. You can't have poor mothers who live in refugee camps or are searching the streets to find food for their children to have the time and to be in the mindset to discuss policies for the country. True democracy is an educated citizen with the leisure time to debate and discuss the future policies for the country. That's what the founding fathers of my country envisioned for the United States. We don't have that here. We don't have the potential of it in Africa because people are scrounging for survival. And when you're surviving, trying to survive, you don't have the time to think about policy for the country. And they use human rights as a weapon. The fundamental human right is the right to live, the right to have food, the right to have transportation, the right to have medical supplies, the right to have electricity 24 hours a day. We don't support those rights. We use democracy and human rights as a weapon. And as I looked at Anthony Blinken's recent trip to South Africa, Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Rwanda, he's pushing the same line. And he's threatening African countries if they continue to work with Russia and China. Now, China is providing economic development, not just aid, but actually development. The United States is not. And the United States is trying to use democracy as a weapon against China's Belt and Road Initiative. In answer to your question, I don't see a reversal in their outlook. What they're doing in condemning the TPLF, because it's so egregious to take fuel from the World Food Program, is they have to maintain their own credibility. They have to recognize and acknowledge these acts. But I don't believe they are ready to fully condemn and actually put down and disarm the TPLF, which is what is required.
Okay, the acronym TPLF stands for Tigray People Liberation Front. Would this acronym goes with their act? Do you think? I mean, do you think this fight is to liberate Tigrayans or seeking a power?
No, it's not to help the Tigrayans. It's not, and it's not helping the people of Ethiopia. If you want to manipulate a country, you want to control a country, think about how you would do it. You would take people on the ground who have, quote, grievances with the country. This is how most regime change takes place. There are grievances against the leadership of the country. And they use a particular mindset of a people to manipulate them. Now, the TPLF has indoctrinated itself with this mindset that they are a nation. Tigray is not a nation, but they have indoctrinated themselves to believe that. Now, once they have indoctrinated themselves, and I don't mean all the people of Tigray, just the leadership of the TPLF, then they can be used and manipulated into taking action that they believe is in their interest. But the people who are pulling the strings have a much larger interest. So the TPLF, we have to unindoctrinate them. We have to actually change the entire thinking and culture of the Ethiopian people. We've got to put to rest this idea of ethnicity. All the regions, the 10 regions of Ethiopia, belong to the Union. They belong to the Republic of Ethiopia. They don't have a separate set of laws, or they don't have a separate set of principles. Therefore, they have to agree to function as part of the nation. If they disagree with the policies, then they have to campaign and try to change the policies, just the way the Prosperity Party changed policies.
Professor, what will be the probable outcome of the ongoing conflict in this round?
My view on the matter is that this will continue, that the TPLF may stop or pull back at a certain point, but I see that there will be continued asymmetric type warfare of attack at various points. May not lead to an all-out war, but it will be a continued disruption for the nation, and it's not going to go away. As Lincoln said, a house divided cannot stand. As long as we have armed groups in the country who believe that they have a right to their control and violate the laws of the nation, and that they have their own separate nation, Tigray is a nation, as long as they have that false belief structure and they're militarily armed, the situation is not going to be easily resolved.
Finally, if you have anything to add, the floor is yours.
Well, my concern is that the government of Ethiopia, the leadership, does not fully understand what it is behind the actions of the TPLF. They're looking at it as a molecular process on the ground, but it's not. It's part of a much bigger deployment against the nation of Ethiopia. Two, I think that the government has to shift the playing field, has to outflank the enemy by initiating an exciting, robust dialogue across the entire nation. Three is the government should launch a program for massive economic development in the nation, including the reconstruction of Tigray and other regions affected by the war. Even if this program cannot be carried out right now, it's important to articulate this program and give the people of Ethiopia a positive mission to collaborate with each other for their own development. Those are my recommendations.
Professor Lawrence Freeman, thank you for making time to give us this insight. I appreciate on behalf of the media house and our audiences.
My pleasure. Glad to be with you as always.
Dear viewers, due to the interest of time, we would like to wrap up our conversation and our edition here. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye. Take care.